Also with vaccination, because all vaccines are based on the prototype, the ancestral virus, which is the Wuhan strain that first emerged. So the question is, how protective is that? Turns out, actually, as I'll show you, surprisingly very effective. And it's because of the way our immune systems work. Again, it's all about our immune systems. So this is showing, again, just kind of highlighting their differences. This is an antigenic cartography. This is a mapping of SARS-CoV-2, the VOX, based on post-infection, so natural infection, people with natural infection without previous, they were naive before that, and also post-vaccination, again, naive, right? So looking at the capacity of the antibodies that they induce, either as natural infection or as a vaccinee, depending on the vaccines, for those antibodies to then recognize and neutralize Omicron, right, compared to the other VOX. So that's this kind of antigenic mapping shows that. So each square, basically, in this particular work, corresponds to a twofold difference in neutralization, right? How well can this antibody block replication of this particular virus, antibody induced by, again, infection or vaccination. So what this is, the way these cartographs, maps are interpreted is, you can see here this clustering, the squares mean antisera, and the circles are the viruses, right, in these assays. Kritu's the expert on this, Kritu and Amel. And so you can see here Omicron sits off by itself, right? It means that it's just much less efficiently neutralized than the other viruses by all those antisera. So it sits off in a distance, all lonely. And here the same thing for vaccinee antisera. And this is certainly what we've been seeing, is that that people are very concerned about being susceptible to infection even though we've been vaccinated, right? That's the big concern that's driven all of this. You can see here all of this is very nice, but Omicron's out here, right? So now we're all doomed, kind of. That's the mentality that we've been living in. So it forms a new antigenic cluster associated with immune escape, right? That's what we can interpret, and likely requiring vaccine updates. In fact, there's only really one vaccine that's being made now that's based on a VOC sequence, but it turns out you may not need to do that, but we'll see. Okay, so I'm showing this slide just as a reminder that and this was recognized very early in the pandemic, that viral load, the amount of virus that you can measure in someone when they're infected, and this is very early in infection, is associated with pre-existing humoral immunity. In other words, if you've been infected before, or been vaccinated before, and then you get infected again, or reinfection, or whatever, the magnitude of the viremia that you then develop is very much associated with how much immunity you already have to that virus, right? So, in other words, there's a protective effect already. So this early work, and this is recognized from 2020, shows there is this clear association, right? So the question is, what does that mean in terms of how we might then understand vaccine efficacy and protection and so on. So now I'm just going to go to some work that's been published just recently, like January, February 2022. Again, a really good time to do a review because these really nice studies have just come out. So this is from South Africa. This is showing high transmissibility of the Omicron variant, shown in this rapid rise of cases in, how do you pronounce it, Mark? Gauteng? Yeah. During this so-called fourth wave, which is late last year, and it's showing this. So basically, and the context is that in this area, the vaccination rates were quite low, right? It's about 36%, and also there's already a very high seroprevalence, right? In the seroprevalence assessments that were being done, so almost 70% previous exposure, right? So they already had this protection, even though the vaccination rates were not very high, not as high as they might be, or you want them to be, perhaps, yeah. Okay, so this is showing, so this is the Omicron variant was identified here, and then now you start to see, so this is case numbers, and then blue is hospitalization, yeah, weak hospitalization rates, and then the deaths. And so you can see here in the previous waves, significant death peaks, right? And here, no, not so much, right? And this is the pattern that first came out, and we thought, oh, maybe it's just, not reporting properly or whatever, but certainly that's been held up to be true, right? So this is the case here. certainly on this pre-existing immune background, but this was really quite amazing. And this is also across most of the age groups. Of course, when you're older, you're a bit more susceptible, but this is basically, you see the same trend across, sorry about this font, it's very small, but basically the same trend, right? And so the death rates were not huge, considering not proportional. So this was showing the, so then you look at all this work and think, well, the hypothesis is that really this is due to cell-mediated immunity, due to natural infection with or without prior vaccination, and so then you get this decoupling of cases from severe disease. You get a lot of cases, but you won't get that much severe disease, right? So why is that? So so we talk about antibody-mediated and then cell-mediated. So, and then we also know, so this is again well, this one came out a little bit earlier than that, yeah. But this has also been observed. So you get a broader neutralization that is against the other variants, meaning the beta variant in this case, and higher titers, neutralization titers after a third dose. So now we're living with third doses and some people having 4, right? So that's what we've observed. And so this is showing you, so you get this kind of waning, so this is showing the different age groups, so 16 to 18 to 55, and then 68 to 85, so older. But you can see, even from just looking at this, naked eye, you can see that there's huge boost effect. These two columns here, and here. So this is after the third dose. You can see this waning kind of response, which is what we've all been anticipating, living with, and thinking this is very bad. But then after the third dose, you get this huge boost, right? So this is 7 days after dose 3, and then 1 month. So it's maintained also. The question is, how long is this going to be maintained for? And so this is the work that's currently going on now. But the fact that you get this massive boost here is very excellent. This is compared to wild type, so the prototype virus. So we've started to recognize that third doses are very beneficial because they boost the immunity that you've induced, that you've formed from your natural infection or from your first any other vaccinations you've had before, your other vaccinations. But then we accept that you get this decline in the magnitude of this response. So this is showing a similar broader neutralization that is against Delta, and then in that you get this boosting after the third dose in both age groups. So also in older people, which is really important to think about, to know. So there is this waning immunity that we're familiar with. So this is weeks after a second dose, and then this is 2 to 4 weeks, and then 6 months after the second dose. And this is neutralization against the prototype, and then also Omicron, which is important, post mRNA vaccination. So this is after second dose, and then 2 to 4 weeks, and then 6 months. So this is the pattern that we've been used to seeing, where you get this decline. This is Omicron here, right? So you can see this very sad kind of thing where we thought, we're all doomed now because it's declining and we've got no protection. So lack of responses post second dose. However, post third dose, despite the antigenic distance, you get this effect here, right? And this is what's really kind of surprising, but also really good to see, thankfully, right? So you get a good response against this very divergent virus that was very far from the prototype, which is the vaccine strain, right? So the mechanisms around that is what people are wondering about. So basically, and this is a different study, which I'll just kind of nice pictures again. So this booster maintains neutralizing activity against Omicron, against this variant, right? So you get, and this is using focus reduction neutralization tests, then looking at the capacity to neutralize, block infection again, right? And then this is showing how basically after, so this is the earliest stage where you get, and you're naive, so it's 2 weeks post the second dose, and then 6 months after the second dose. So the red figures are individuals with no detectable neutralizing response, and then recovering, and then this is 6 months post the second dose, so you're starting to get some with, you do get declining antibodies. So I said the wrong thing. There's no declining, but this is declining. So you do get this declining capacity to produce neutralizing antibodies. And then here is after the third dose, you get this huge boost here. So we're seeing the same thing being reported in these different studies. So by 6 months, all naive, vaccinated, majority of recovered vaccinated subjects had lost neutralizing activity against, this is Omicron. And then, but following a booster or third dose, which is now just part of the regular schedule, 3 to 1 month, a vast majority of subjects retained neutralization capacity against the variant. So neutralizing antibody is the so-called, is still considered to be the correlate of protection, right? That's what you want to induce. It is for many vaccines, and certainly still is the case for this one. So these findings support the need for a booster dose to maintain neutralizing activity against Omicron. Okay, so then, so basically just I'm showing you the same kinds of data. So vaccination boosts and forms an extended immunity. So I'm going to actually skip ahead because I wanted just to talk about the T cell work, and this is where we are now. So very briefly, vaccines elicit highly conserved cellular immunity to SARS-CoV-2 Omicron, right? And it's the cellular immunity is what's very important. So this is low magnitude total antibody responses in the same people, right? Collected at the same time. So the antibody responses here are very low, certainly compared to the other VOX. And then this is neutralizing antibody levels, and this is really important because they're also low, right? However, when you look at T cell responses, you can see it's equivalent, right? Across these are different vaccines, you can measure CTL and CD4 and CD8 responses, interferon gamma, to Omicron. So that was kind of quite amazing. And then this is the CD8 response, and again you get the same magnitude, very comparable magnitude to Omicron compared to the other VOX, which is not what you see for humoral immunity so much, right? This is a very complicated diagram, but basically I'll be very quick. Just talking about how there's a lot of work being done to understand what compartment this immunity is coming from, because of course you have to have CD4s to switch on your B cells to make neutralizing antibodies, which is what you want. So you have to have that pathway, right? So the fact is that you have these strong responses. I'll just summarize here to say again, so you have these huge studies that have shown this, about 70% of Omicron spike cross-reactive B cells. So these B cells are cross-reactive. These are memory cells, right, which have been class switched. They've gone through the germinal center, and then they come out and they undergo somatic hypermutation. They're exactly what you want, and it shows that they are actually strongly capable of cross-recognizing Omicron, which is really amazing, right? So that's our very good news, and I think that makes us kind of all relax now, I think, yes? So we can relax and think we've got really good T cell responses to these vaccines, and also I included this to show that they are definitely of the effector and memory phenotype, right? So we can be very confident that these are really robust, really stringent responses. The question is how long they last for, but you may just need another booster. So I'm just skipping through these, but that's a really exciting kind of finding, I think. Very reassuring. Oh, very complex, but this is a lab that does amazing work. But I included this because they've reiterated what other groups have done, but what they've gone the step further, and they've created these panels based on a huge number of variants of variants. So they've really included this diversity, and again, the data is all good because it's very strong cross-recognition of Omicron, very high levels, using these peptide libraries based on other variants, which you never would have been exposed to, right? So this is really reassuring, and I just put this in just to say, oh, well, there was some concern that with the waning of immunity, it was the short-term, short-living plasma cells, right? So short-term memory, and that we were doomed again. We've always been doomed. But no, it turns out it's the longer-term memory compartment, these class switch cells that undergo this somatic hypermutation in real time as you're exposed, right? So that's very exciting. And that's the final picture. Yes, and summarizing all of this just to show that we're understanding more about immunity, and it's basically these mechanisms are working for us and giving us this strong capacity to